Hi, everyone. We'll just get started now. Thank you for joining. So welcome back to Slash Data Sessions. My name is Mozilla, and I will be your MC for the next 50 minutes or so. Today, we're going to talk about what makes a developer program successful. What will be presented to you today stems for our Developer Programs Leader Survey, where we go out and query you and your peers who run developer programs. The presentation will be led by our very own data journalist, Richard Muir. But before I pass on that discussion to Rich, I'll say a few words about the sessions and why we are here. This session today is a bit celebratory. We're celebrating today because it's our last session for the year 2020. This year's series brought insights on several key topics for developer-centric teams, like API and non-API developer communities, who and why open source developers contribute to open source, developer psychographics, and more cool topics. So do check those out. You can get them on demand or browse through the slides at weknowdevelopers.co. Now, a bit about Slash Data and why we are here. So if you don't know us that well, you should know Slash Data is a research and analyst firm hyper-focused on developers. We help developer-centric teams or organizations engaging developers understand them better. Everything we do is to help you make data-backed, strategic, marketing, and product-related decisions. Within our global surveys, we help to uncover who developers are, understanding their profiles, where they are, what they're involved in, population metrics, and even segmentation. We explore what they buy. So what are the driving factors or features of your products that affect usage, adoption, and satisfaction? And lastly, where they are going. So that's developer perception about emerging technologies and which areas are they going to next. So yeah, and here's a snapshot of the orgs we serve, or the companies we've served. Getting to the research now. Outside of any custom or bespoke research we might do within a year, we run 2 global surveys annually, pulling the responses of more than 30,000 developers each year. And I want to note here that there's another reason to celebrate. We have now launched and currently have in the field our 20th wave, and that's 10 years of running these global surveys. We now capture more than 10 audiences, everyone from mobile to desktop to IoT, ML. Embedded is a new branch as well here. So important to note as well that these are not distinct people. Developers tend to work in multiple areas, so there is indeed a lot of overlap here. We're reaching more than 160 countries, and it's a very broad reach and truly representative sample of that global community. We do this by not tapping into a single community or using a single panel, but we've built an extensive network of near 90 to 100 channels, including everything from developer and language groups to Slack channels, to paid ads, to vendor communities, to capture an exhaustive and representative audience. We have a lot to offer, even our research partners within those. So if you want to know more and you want to get involved, do reach out with the details at the end of the presentation, and we're happy to share more. Yes, so I think that's it for me. Just a note to sort of housekeeping. Questions, please do put those in the Q&A, and I will be managing them as we move on. So I'll do my best to make sure we capture everyone's questions and bring them up to Richard. So we will be doing questions at the end of the presentation just to let Richard do his thing. And we have scheduled time, so we will have 10 or 15 minutes or so to talk and have questions at the end. And that's it. And I think it's on to you, Rich.
Thank you very much, Mozilla. So hi, my name is Richard. I'm the data journalist responsible for the Developer Program Leaders Survey. And today we're going to be talking you through a few of the findings from this survey. But first of all, just some quick top-level information about it. Mozilla has just described our /data developer survey. But we also, we want to get a 360 view of developer relations and developer marketing. So over our FDS Summit, our Future Developer Summit, a couple of months ago, we ran a survey aimed at developer program leaders and people involved in developer relations. We asked around 20 questions, we got 100 responses, and I'm sure some of you may have even taken the survey yourself. And so today I'm going to be presenting some of the results from this survey. And I'll be talking about the size of developer programs and different ways of measuring that, talking about what developer relations practitioners do all day. We'll then touch upon how to justify your developer program and how your peers are justifying their developer programs. And following that, we'll be looking at how to measure success using dollar gain or KPIs. Penultimately, we'll then take a look at segmentation and strategies and discover how different developer programs are using these to help inform their decisions. And then finally, I'll give you a little preview into our developer program benchmarking research. So without further ado, let's have a look at the size of developer programs. We asked 3 questions to help us gauge the size of developer programs. And the first of those was asking how many products does the developer program serve? And we see that over a third of developer program leaders cover 5 or less products. And so it's important to note that this isn't developer programs themselves. We asked individuals, so there may be responses from multiple companies here. Multiple responses from the same company here. So this is the percent of developer relations practitioners, and a third of them cover 5 or less products. But there's a fifth cover more than 100 products. And we have this gap in the middle here, in this kind of middle ground. And this is something you'll see replicated certainly in another one of these measures. But it's interesting to note as well that over 1 in 10 of developer program leaders cover just a single product. So there's this real hyper focus here, but also a lot who are covering an awful lot of products. Moving on to looking at a different measure, we asked about the FTE headcount in the developer program. And once again, this is the percent of developer relations practitioners. And most developer relations practitioners work in teams of 10 or fewer. 55% cumulatively work in teams of just one single person, 2 to 5 or 6 to 10. But those 8% of people working, they are just a single team. I really hope that that's the same people who work on just one product there. Interestingly, this is one of the 3 metrics where we don't see this gap in the middle here. Is actually we see some of the bigger programs have more than 1,000 people working in developer relations. But if we move to the next slide, we can see that actually, once again, we have this gap in the middle comes back. And this is when we're looking at the budget. So 2 in 5 have a budget of 500K or less, but over a third have a budget of over 10 million. And to me, this distribution here, where you have lots of small programs and some big programs as well, kind of reflects the state of the software industry in some ways. So there are many small companies offering services and APIs to developers, and I feel these are represented down here, but there's also a few large companies which dominate the landscape. And so receiving multiple responses from these companies, you can imagine who would be in the developer programs with a budget of more than $10 million. So that concludes our look at the size of developer programs from the 3 measures of number of products, FTE headcount, and budget. Now to take a look at what developer relations practitioners do all day. I'm sure most of you know that better than I do, but this is what the data says. We see that this graph shows the percentage of DevRel practitioners who said that each of these categories took up a significant time in their day, or budget, or time, or effort. And we see here that strategizing and direct engagement are the most common activities. These first 3 bars here, you've got creating and maintaining developer portals, creating a developer strategy, and direct developer engagement. This balance of strategy and action is really, really vital in ensuring a successful program. You have to think about where you're going, but you also have to get there. It's also encouraging to me to see that less than 1 in 10 DevRel practitioners are spending their time consolidating resources or doing SEO and SEM. And this is encouraging because it's good to see that the experts are doing the expert work. This is kind of more manual tasks, which maybe delegated to freelancers or other things, and it's good to see that it's actually the minority here. But we do see that a fifth spend a significant amount of time getting internal buy-in. And so these are the people that are struggling to justify their developer program. As we'll see over the next couple of slides, Many developer programs are taken for granted, or they struggle to find the right arguments. And there's actually many that don't know the dollar gain of an onboarded developer. And so this says to me that there's actually a need for more data to back up the decision-making process. So first of all, being able to justify your developer program to get that internal buy-in, it would free up some time in the day. There's, 1/5 of people here are spending a significant amount of time, budget, or effort in simply justifying the existence of the developer program. We really believe that having developer programs is essential. And so, finding the justification, I believe, should be a priority if you haven't done so already. Moving on to this, to the justifying the developer program, we can see that 27% do so with a calculated dollar gain, which is the indirect contribution, and about a fifth do so with a calculated dollar gain. But here we have a similar number saying that the benefit of the program is taken for granted, and 16% are struggling to find justification. But we also see up at this end of the chart as well that compared to your 25%, a fifth and a quarter of developer program leaders who use a calculated dollar gain, actually many more piggyback upon product development investment or use qualitative arguments. And to me, this shows that in many organizations, developer relations is not a first-class citizen. So a lot of this is due to perception. Without the hard data to back up these decisions, without this dollar gain, justifying the developer programs is difficult. And for those that are doing so with a qualitative argument or as part of product development investment, I commend you, because that's a difficult job to do so. But if you can, find estimates, find ways of getting this dollar gain, and find ways of measuring success. We also asked people in the survey what the estimated lifetime gain from an onboarded developer is. And the first thing that jumps out to me is there's a real communication problem within developer relations teams. Here, 40% of all developer program leaders said they do not know the lifetime value of an onboarded developer. But when we change that to those with, when we look at those with just a calculated gain, that's a quarter of these programs, a quarter of people who work in a program that actually calculate the gain of an onboarded developer. They do not know how much that developer is worth. And so, we prioritize communicating to developers. We extol the virtues of, targeted communication, frequent communication, making sure the right message hits the right person at the right time. But it seems that we often forget to communicate within our teams. And so for those of you that are struggling to justify your developer program, I recommend starting to estimate the lifetime gain here. So, you can have a broad estimate. Here is $2,000 to $5,000. It doesn't have to be precise, but what's important is that you have a number that you have some confidence in. You can then understand this, communicate to your team, and communicate to your managers as well to get that buy-in. And this is, we can clearly see the value that developers bring. This box here shows that 25% of people surveyed says that a developer is worth between $1,000 and $10,000 lifetime value. And that's a lot. That's significant. And these are estimates, but there's nothing to stop you, if you don't have such estimates, making them yourself, and having this hard data to back up your decision, to back up your actions and decisions is really important. And so, as well as the dollar gain, there's also a lot of KPIs that are used by people in different disciplines. So this graph here shows the percentage of people involved in each discipline, with the dark blue being developer marketing, the light blue being developer relations, and the yellow being people involved in developer tooling. This shows the proportion in each discipline who say that they use these KPIs to inform the decision-making process. And there's some really clear and interesting patterns here. And there's actually relatively little overlap. I mean, I know each KPI is used by each discipline, but there are definite dominant KPIs for each discipline, and it's really interesting to see this. So those that are involved in developer marketing prioritize online engagement and do so heavily. 3/4 of them use social media followers as one of their KPIs. 2/3 with page or video views. About half using ads analytics or unique visitors. And so this means that, it's truly in an online space where marketeers are engaging with developers. Certainly with the recent situation with COVID-19 and physical events, this has become even more so. But it is interesting to see that these online areas are where people in developer marketing are focusing their efforts. But that's not true across all the online space. When we move down to Stack Overflow activity and GitHub activity, this drops to around 1 in 10 people doing developer marketing. So it's not simply the online space that is important to marketeers. It is the content, it's what developers do there. So when we follow this over, we see that over 4 in 10 people involved in developer relations, they think about Stack Overflow activity and GitHub activity. And when we look at dev tooling, over nearly half people involved in dev tooling look at GitHub activity. And you can imagine how that would quite easily inform the decisions for this. So there is some overlap, but there are these really clear patterns. For developer relations practitioners, this group makes the highest usage of calculated survey statistics. So 6 in 10 using awareness, over half using satisfaction scores, or 4 in 10 using a net promoter score. And so at Slashdata, we have well-established methodologies for calculating awareness of products and usage of products, developer satisfaction scores, and net promoter scores that we use in lots of our research publications. And so for developer relations, this kind of third-party statistics are really important, and they really help to inform decision-making. Returning to developer tooling, we already discussed GitHub activity, but as well, we also have these SDK downloads and product usage, which are used by well over half, or not well, by over half of developers here. And this is really interesting because to me, these two and GitHub activity as well, sit apart from a lot of these, is because this is actual behavioral data. The people here are using the product usage, so telemetry and things like that, to understand exactly what developers are doing with their products, so they can improve them. And you can improve these products based on direct data. So now we're going to move on to segmentation and strategy. So we asked a few questions around about how developer program leaders segment their developers, or if they do, and how they develop strategies for dealing with this information. And so 1 in 5 developer program leaders do not differentiate or segment their developers. And we really believe that segmentation is key here. Segmentation is such a powerful way of ensuring that your message resonates more with your audience. Developers are not a homogeneous group, and so talking to them on their terms, in their language, is really important. And segmentation gets you a long way there. For those that do segment, though, you might be able to see that the bars of highlight in red are not things I consider to be good topics for segmentation. These are type of development, usage of adjacent technologies or platforms, operating systems and devices, or programming languages. And the reason why we don't believe these are adequate data points for segmentations is because they're so changeable. Taking a specific example of devices or operating systems, anybody remember the BlackBerry? If your segmentation was built on the BlackBerry, your segmentation is obsolete. And we actually have a webinar discussing how to segment developers, which we will post in the chat during this presentation. So I recommend that you check it out. It's free content. It's really, really interesting. And it should teach you a little bit more. This is really just an overview I'm giving here. But for these that are, good data points to segment on, 40% choose target audience, a third choosing professionals, and 30% using target industry. And this to me says that there's lots of developer program leaders who are really wanting to understand just who their developers are, and that's really encouraging, I think. It's also interesting to note that 1 in 5 create a segmentation for geography. But when I flick to the next slide, 2 in 5 don't have a regional strategy. So we ask who has a regional strategy, and 40% say no. But 20% have already got a segmentation on geography, and that means there's 20% of these developer program leaders who have a segmentation on geography sitting there ready to go, but have not chosen to use it. And if you are one of those people, I really recommend doing so, because you've done all the hard work, you've built a segmentation. Now it's the strategy, and it's the strategy that will inform your decisions. And regional strategy is, in my opinion, really important, because you can speak to developers in the way that they want to be spoken to. There's lots of cultural differences to take into account, and not only that, is being closer to your developers, either physically or in other ways, is really important, just to make sure that they feel heard. And one way we speak to developers is we ask them to rate their experiences with different developer programs. And now I'm going to talk to you very briefly about our developer program benchmarking research. So this research is composed of a main report with a deep dive that changes every year. And this year it's a look at events. There's also access to client-specific information as well as to a dashboard. And so here is, excuse me, here is one of the charts from our developer program benchmarking survey. And this chart shows for 3 different metrics how the world's top developer programs compare. So first, here we have engagement, and this is how often developers use the resources. An engaged developer, by our definition, is one that uses resources at least once a week. We also ask developers how satisfied they are with the resources that they use. And we use that to calculate a satisfaction score, which we display here along the horizontal axis. And we also simply ask if developers use the resources of each company. And the size of that company's developer community is shown by the bubble, with Google having the largest and SAP having one of the smallest. Maybe there's a small one hidden in the middle here. And what we do with this methodology is we compare these scores for each vendor against the average and try and put these into some kind of quadrant. So you have the market leaders up here with Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, with very high engagement scores and very high satisfaction scores. Here we have the satisfying specialists. So, in some cases, these are vendors that don't really have a broad program in the same way that Microsoft and Google do. Instead, Cisco or Unity, they solve, Unity specifically, solve like very specific problems for developers. And we see that they do so very well because the satisfaction score is actually quite high. But because it's so specialized, for example, in the case of DigitalOcean, engagement is actually quite low because developers don't need to access these resources very often. Down here in the under-realized value category, these are developer programs with high engagement, which means that developers use these resources very often, but they actually have quite low satisfaction. So the developer experience is not what it could be. And with effort, the experience could be improved. And developers will use the resources more and may even increase the size of the community. And finally, we have the developer programs with room to grow. So these are the ones with low engagement and low satisfaction. And I guess one of the benefits of being in this quadrant is it's actually really easy to set up a strategy to improve. Driving satisfaction and driving engagement are the 2 building blocks for building your community, because engaged and satisfied developers will tell their friends. But we don't just have a view of this data at this global level, at this view at a vendor level. We actually also dive much deeper into the data. You can see here in the center, we've got all of these, all the vendors, but we also speak to developers and ask them which sectors they work in addition to over 200 other questions. But specifically, we ask them about their experiences with the different resources. And this is one of the key strengths of the developer program benchmarking research. You can use developers' views of these features to inform your strategy. So we ask them about their experiences with documentation and sample code, with professional certification or mentoring or meetups. And you can find out which of these are important to your developers specifically and understand how these developers interact with your products and with your resources and where improvements can be made. So this gives you like a really hyper-targeted focus on where to make improvements. And you know what, if you do take a look at this and find there's other things you want to know, we also do custom survey design as well. So you can go a level deeper and really get to know your developers. So thank you very much for listening. That concludes this presentation. Are there any questions, please?
Thank you so much, Rich. I do have a couple questions, and if anyone else has questions, please do add. But I do have things as you were going through this. There's a couple things. So first, on that slide that you showed the budgets, you showed, if we go back to that, like you had like a 34%, on the budget slide. No, not this one. The size of developer programs is really what I want. Yeah. So you have there like 34% said that they're more than 10 million that they're spending there. And then the next slide or the previous slide where we're looking at like there's that's the head count, and you're also showing us that basically, and even even this, right? The number of products. So it's not, I can understand if we have multiple companies that are multiple people from the same company that are answering. But at the same time, I want to understand this. Like there's 22% that say that they are more than 100, but the spending budget is not equal when we're looking at the previous slide. So is it telling us that basically there are companies that are really not investing still? Is that what we're seeing here? Like if they have more than 100 products, I mean, what could justify that change?
That's a really good question, actually. This is, not every product is going to need the same level of support. First things first, those with more than 100 products, I would expect there to be a correlation, a positive correlation. Developer programs which are bigger and serve more products should, by rights, have more budget. But, here we have 34% with more than 10 billion budget and 22% with more than 100 products. So if anything, it seems that these larger programs actually have much more funding relative. There's more people reporting higher funding here. It's the smaller developer programs are the ones that maybe, struggle a bit more because, as you add products to your developer program, you benefit from economies of scale. The additional cost of adding your 100th product compared to your 99th is so much more than adding your second product to your first. So it's actually these smaller developer programs with a few products that have, similar levels of funding we're seeing here. But I would say the marginal cost of servicing these products is actually much higher. Does that answer your question, Muscula?
Yeah, totally. It's really interesting to look at those differences there. There's also another question that I get a lot, actually. And when we're looking at this, probably the slide that is showing the organizations that if they know how much revenue an individual developer, this one. So dollar gain in KPIs, I should have known the title, I didn't note it. When we're looking at that, so this is a big number that 38% of people the people answering the survey do not know the dollar gain or the value of a developer in an actual number. That sounds a little bit problematic. And I have a question because I know that this is a challenge for a lot of people, but at the same time, could it be that there are organizations that don't really care? I mean, I don't think that's the case, but do they want to know and they're not? In my experience, I believe they want to know and they just haven't found the way. Like, how do we look at this? I mean, do you think it's also problematic, or what do you think that these organizations are missing that would help them know this?
I mean, for starters, you're asking a data person if you think we need more data. So my answer is obviously yes. But I think, it's hard to know what's more concerning. Is it those programs, 40% of programs that don't know what the developers are, or the quarter of programs that do know, but the people working for them don't? So these two bars here tell a much deeper story. And I touched upon this kind of lack of communication within developer programs in my presentation. But you're right to pull out this as well, that 40% of all developer programs don't actually know this, haven't estimated the lifetime gain from an onboarded developer, even in a range as big as $3,000 or $5,000. And I do think that is a problem. I think, we saw before that people are struggling to justify the developer program. People are taking time out of their day to justify this. And, simply having an estimate of the gain from an onboarded developer, having a number, putting a number on it, a dollar number, is super powerful because it's often, it helps you understand your ROI. It helps you speak to your finance people as well. They want to see, they're throwing money into developer relations. What are they getting back from it? It's this internal politics, I think. So I do think there is so much benefit to studying your developer behavior and understanding in a broad sense just how much they're worth. Because then you can understand, okay, if a developer to me is worth $5,000 and I spend $2,000 to acquire one, that's a good deal. If the developer's worth just $1,000 and your acquisition cost is $2,000, then you need to reconsider your strategy. Like, you know, as I said at the start, you're asking a data person if you should have more data, and the answer is yes.
Yeah, and I think this is actually tying into a question that we have from the audience. Jason asks, are there any tools or services you'd recommend to help aggregate or track KPIs? I don't know if we want to discuss tools or services or do any like recommendations, but I think what we maybe, unless you want to answer that, Rich, but I think that possibly understanding what they need to measure and how, like, is something that we can answer. I don't know if you can offer any tools.
Yeah, so I'll skip onto this next slide about KPIs. You know, developer relations it's a growing industry, and people are springing up all over the place to service it. There's lots of cool stuff going on, lots of people, you know, looking specifically at how to measure success of developer relations. And Orbit.love started recently, and those are, you know, they're doing some really, really interesting work in developing these KPIs. You've also got GitHub activity, Stack Overflow activity, which is, you know, that's the kind of standard. You can just go to GitHub or Stack Overflow and get that. The social media follows, ad analytics. A lot of this is actually just like standard marketing KPIs, you know, especially for people in dev marketing, social media followers and things like that. So yes, there's lots of places to get information, you know, and I would be remiss if I didn't say there's also developer satisfaction scores, survey analytics, and net promoter scores. But I am biased and I am going to say that. But you're right to say that it is actually, you know, you need to know what you want to change before you decide what you want to measure. And, you know, these three broad churches of dev marketing, dev relations, and dev tooling, this, you know, very broadly, they all have different priorities. But within each of these disciplines, there's so much stuff going on. There's so many different sub priorities, and going, you know, down at an organizational level. Your dev marketing team might be really pushing video tutorials, so you're looking specifically at video tools. So before you decide what to measure, think about what you want to change. I think we wrote about this in the book recently as well, actually. You know what you want to change before you choose what to measure, and when you know what to measure, then start looking for your data sources. And there's, you know, there's people out there that can help you understand what you need to measure in order, you know, in order to have success. Does that answer the question?
Well, it doesn't. It's I know that Jason is asking for like actual tools and recommendations, and that's something that what we would probably say from our end is that we would want to, and something that you mentioned I think resonates really well is, what do you want to change? What is it? And so then we can help you figure out what to measure. And I think this is stuff that I've seen and that we've worked on with people that, you know, our partners and our clients as well, is understanding if it's usage, if it's awareness, if it's tracking their satisfaction, and how to influence usage, how to influence and get more adoption. There's a lot of different things that we can do. And that is like going out in the field, getting that information, getting that data, and starting to track. You mentioned developer satisfaction score, you mentioned NPS score. This is kind of how we would do that, is going into the field and asking those questions and getting that information, whether it's from your community or the global community. So I understand that. And these are the tools that, this is what we would use, and this is what we do, and how we support these needs, and trying and help the audience that is listening and, you know, track their KPIs and measure them. So we do have another question, so I don't want to say, but thank you for that. What kinds of content?
I just wanted to revise slightly what I said. Sorry, I just want to revise slightly what I said. I'm a data guy, so I always want more data. But there's also a cost to having more data, which is why you have to make decisions, and good decisions, about what you're going to measure. Because if you just collect a big data lake and start sifting through it, you're going to find stuff, and it's going to cost you a lot of time. But choosing a few very specific KPIs that you know will impact your business, that's more powerful than just collecting data for the sake of it.
Totally. Thank you. Now let's go to the next question. So we have, what kind of content types are must-haves to attract developers to your community? How would you balance the tech focus versus workflow-based focus for your content? That's something we cover in our programs benchmarking, isn't it?
Yes, that I've just flicked over to this slide now.
Yeah.
See. Oh, I can zoom in. Okay, that was really helpful. I've never done that before, but it works quite well. So, it depends on how you want to engage developers. We find, I'm going to talk about just professionals right now because, that's an audience that I think is, so important. They're the people that ultimately pay for the services, right? And professionals have an agenda. We see with students and hobbyists that they're really, really happy to have these kind of ephemeral learning opportunities and networking and this kind of slightly fluffier approach. Whereas professionals have got limited time and they have an agenda and they want to know things very quickly. They want to ask a question and get an answer. So if you target professionals, you will prioritize other aspects of your developer program. You will prioritize training courses and hands-on labs. You will prioritize tutorials and how-to videos over training courses as a learning experience. You would prioritize answers in public forums or technical support over documentation and sample code, although documentation is obviously very important. But equally, if you're looking to build your pipeline of developers, you're going to want to attract students with the interactive coding events, with the meetups and the hackathons. But as well as your audience, it's also, what your business is. Not on this list, maybe down here, is access to devices and hardware. If you work for a hardware vendor, this is going to be important for you. As well as regional differences as well. In East Asia, we see marketplaces for software expertise is actually quite popular as developers look to outsource where they can. So there's no panacea, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to what content type should you be producing. Once again, this comes back to strategy. It's taking a step back and saying, which type of developer do I want to attract? What type of content do these developers consume? Where do they consume it? And then you can start to build your content strategy. Does that answer the question?
I think it really does. And I think that it zooms down to your case, and thank you. And we got a yes, thank you there. And it zooms into your case, what type of audience you're targeting, exactly what you said. I think it's really, it really resonates. And that's why we run this type of research as well, right? That's how we do it. I do have I'm going to just go in and do one last question before we head out. So I actually want to look at that bubble chart at the beginning. You showed that bubble chart. Yes, this one where it has the different vendors. And you said something there that kind of resonated a bit with me, was saying about those that are especially there where it says satisfying specialists. And I wanted to understand, because relative to the chart, they look low. But I want to understand if you're satisfying specialists, is that where they should be? Should they be happy in their position, or should they be looking at growing and moving into that becoming a market leader? Where should they be, and is that satisfactory that they're there?
So on this methodology, the market leaders are here with the high engagement, and the thing that ties these three market leaders, Mozilla, Microsoft, and Google, together is the breadth of their developer program. They have the cloud services covering all kinds of things, mobile, all kinds of web technologies. It's the breadth of the developer program that really makes this. The satisfying specialists, they have a focused developer program, and they do so very well. But they're satisfying developers. That doesn't mean that you should be satisfied with where you are. I mean, my view is, technology is defined by innovation. And so for these developer programs sat in the satisfying specialist quadrant here, this is really, you've got the baton, you're running, but you need to keep innovating, because there are other developer programs who will be innovating to try and catch up. So Unreal and Epic Games will be looking at Unity satisfaction score and thinking, how can we get an edge? How can we improve this? And so satisfying developers is not, it's a good thing, but it doesn't mean you should rest on your laurels. It really, this is actually a chance to, this is proof of innovation and proof of excellence, but innovation needs to breed more innovation in order to stay competitive. So it's a good place to be, but it's not, it's not a place of assured success, in my view.
Mm. Okay.
Does that answer your question, Muscular?
Yeah, I think it does. It's just there's always room for improvement and tracking that growth over time for some of these, I feel like, from what you're saying.
Yes, yeah, very much so. But there's always room to grow and change, innovate and learn. I really believe that.
Awesome.
So if there's no more questions, I think that concludes it. Are there any more?
I do. I do have one more question if we do have time. Actually, I think we do. And that is, it's new. So the regional strategy. This is, you were showing like the different, that one. So the segmentation and strategy, and you were talking about the, how many programs have a regional strategy, and looking at that, again, this was surprising to me. So, and I'm trying to understand, because I'm looking at the size of programs, I'm looking at how much money they have. I'm like, and then again, it just keeps on, it looks so different. I'm very surprised that I would expect that there would be more differentiation, there would be a more global approach, especially with those big programs, and what we're seeing is that that's not the case, that a lot of people are still doing sort of just like a one size fits all strategy.
Yes, there are a lot of programs doing one size fits all. So, this focus on our home market, our program is global. These are the ones that are, they're not really bothered by any kind of regional strategy. I would hope that the more well-funded programs have a more appropriate regional strategy. That would be truly my hope. The data for this, the sample size doesn't quite allow us to draw meaningful conclusions to that end. So which is why we're only showing one question at a time. Otherwise, we would be able to cross the questions and understand better. But I would really hope that the larger, more well-funded developer programs do have regional teams in place, or at least differentiate services by region. Localizing content, to my mind, is really the basic minimum.
Really? Okay. And that's actually a question I get a lot.
Translations, right?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot as well, is that I'm being asked, like, and we're being asked to give data to prove, like, where should they localize, which countries should they localize content. And I know we do that in sort of the research that we cover and that, but this is really interesting to see that it's a small percentage of that audience that actually do localize. And I think some of that comes with making those decisions and having the data to support that decision to localize content. It seems to be, because I get that question a lot, like, should we localize, should we translate all our docs in these countries, in these regions? And so it's really interesting to see I think it's a problem. Like, I think it's something that the community needs to do a lot more of. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. And choosing to localize content, translation comes with a cost. And if you translate into one language, that's an opportunity cost to translate into another. And so deciding if, and if so, where, it really depends on regionally what your strategy is and where you're going. So the regional strategy really ties into the localization. If East Asia is a growth region for you, start translating into Chinese. If you're not concerned, if you don't see a market there, then it's probably best not to. But it's really about where you are and where you're going and where you want to be.
Data-backed strategies, Rich.
Yeah.
Data-backed strategy in the bottom line. Awesome. This was super interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I hope those that joined really enjoyed it as well.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you as well. Our contact details there, so the group can engage at any time and ask us your questions.